Is the human body still evolving? When it comes to modern humans, you could say they're not what they used to be. Just getting up makes you see stars, getting out of bed leaves you dizzy, climbing stairs makes you feel weak, and going for a run leaves you exhausted. Of course, this doesn't mean modern humans are inherently weak. Rather, human society advanced into civilization too quickly for our bodies to keep up. After hundreds of thousands of years with a hunter's physique, we suddenly found ourselves working in offices, while our genes still think we're cattle or horses roaming grasslands. In reality, we're just workhorses in the office now. This mismatch means our original body structure is no longer compatible with our current way of life. Take, for example, the perineum. As everyone knows, the main function of the human anus is to stay closed. Unless you live in certain binary cities, it only opens for a very limited amount of time throughout your life. But the unreasonable part is that humans use the same reflex arc for both defecation and urination. You can't control your anal sphincter and urinary sphincter separately. In other words, when you relax your urinary sphincter, your anal sphincter also relaxes. Under normal circumstances, feces are solid and have a lot of friction, so this usually isn't a problem. It can still hold things in, but if you happen to have diarrhea, and your stool turns into a semi-liquid mixture with less friction, then all that liquid can come out together. When our human ancestors were still running naked and happy across the grasslands chasing prey, peeing and pooping at the same time didn't really matter. But now that we've entered civilized society, this is obviously unacceptable. Another example is motion sickness. The principle behind it is that the vestibular system in your ear senses your body is unbalanced and thinks you're moving, but your eyes know you're sitting still in a vehicle. So the two send completely opposite messages to the brain, and after some consideration, the brain concludes, you must have eaten poisonous mushrooms and gotten poisoned, so it makes you vomit. The reason for this is that the body simply never anticipated that humans would one day invent something like cars. Another example is the human immune system. Primitive humans ate raw meat and blood, living in a very rough environment, so having a more sensitive immune system was a good thing. But in modern society, an overreactive immune system can inexplicably cause allergies to common things, which I'm sure everyone has experienced. For example, when I was a child, I couldn't eat more than 5 crayfish in one sitting. If I ate more, I'd have an allergic reaction, but later I came up with a solution: persistence. I would eat only a small amount of crayfish at a time. After all these years, I'm no longer allergic to crayfish. Some body parts are now useless for us. For example, fingernails are still useful, like making a mark on a mosquito bite. But toenails are useless. If they don't grow right, they can dig in and cause painful ingrown toenails. I think the pain of an ingrown toenail plus someone stepping on your foot is about equal to being kicked in the groin. Another example is the male, which, aside from sometimes being a switch for pleasure, is pointless. It serves no purpose, and most of the time gets in the way. In marathons, it's common for male athletes' chests to get chafed and bleed, and some men even develop sadness syndrome, where just a touch makes them want to cry. Returning to the question, are our modern bodies still evolving? Whenever this topic comes up, some claim evolution is just pseudoscience. That's often because many don't really understand what evolution means. Translating evolution as Jinhua, implying advancement, isn't accurate. Yanhua, meaning change or adaptation, fits better. The word Jinhua gives the impression things always get more advanced, but biological evolution doesn't mean becoming higher, bigger, or stronger. Biologically, humans aren't superior or inferior to bacteria, viruses, paramecia, snails, earthworms, or mothsui, all just adapt to survive. Whether a species has intelligence doesn't affect gene transmission. The key is simply surviving to sexual maturity. It's like a cooking pot. The crust at the bottom doesn't affect how well you stir-fry food. The most important thing when cooking is just being able to get the food out of the pot. That's what leads to biological evolution. You can't really say it's about pursuing perfection or exquisite craftsmanship. It's more like a middle-aged couple just muddling through life together. What else can you do? Get a divorce. And precisely because of this, our human bodies are far from perfect and have many irrational aspects. When it comes to the flaws in the human body, there are just too many things to complain about. They've talked before about a series on the human body and listed a few bugs, but in reality, there are many more. For example, there's a common high place response that most people have. When you stand somewhere high and look down, you always feel an urge to jump. That's because your brain subconsciously thinks the place is too high and dangerous, and you must get away from the danger immediately. The fastest way to escape is to jump. Another example, when you lose a lot of blood, your body tries to keep your brain conscious by speeding up blood flow, which actually makes you die even faster. Of course, the modern human body is still evolving. For instance, the proportion of people who are lactose tolerant has increased significantly compared to a century ago. Or take the example from the 1880s, when doctors discovered that about 10% of people had an extra artery in their arm called the median artery. By the 20th century, this proportion had risen to 30%, and now it's already at 35%. These changes are slow and not easy to notice. Moreover, while human evolution used to be driven by natural selection, now it is more influenced by social selection. In primitive society, the natural environment was the main force guiding evolution high mortality, and many bachelors weeded out genes unsuited for survival. But in modern society, with advanced medicine and abundant living conditions, many genes disadvantageous for survival can be preserved. For example, if a primitive human had a mutation that caused deformed limbs or intellectual disabilities, he would inevitably starve because he couldn't hunt. But today, if he was the foolish son of a rich landlord, he could live well, not only live well, but also pass on his genes. And not only could he pass on his genes, he might even marry a beautiful wife. Isn't that infuriating? Another piece of evidence for human evolution is that during the embryonic stage, we actually repeat part of the evolutionary process. For example, as mentioned before, humans have gill-like structures during the embryonic stage, and as the embryo grows, these gill structures gradually disappear. Similarly, in the first few weeks of human embryonic development, you can clearly see a tail, which also gradually regresses later on. However, even though humans have lost their tails, our fascination with tails certainly hasn't disappeared. Tell me, is there any pure and kind-hearted man who doesn't like a big, fluffy tail?